stone, its sides reproducing the slant of the sun's rays as they angle toward the earth through a cloud break. The pyramid also represented the pharaoh's divine place in Egyptian society.
The king is at the apex, the pharaoh, and it spreads down, widening out. The immediate family are the closest and higher portions until you get right down to the broad base. It tells us how unified the kingdom was, how the king, the pharaoh, could call upon forces to build, and people were pleased to work on this because it was a monument to the king when he became a god after he died, and in so doing it ensured their own well-being on earth.
Ironically, the very top or capstone of the Red Pyramid that symbolized Snefru has fallen to the ground where it has been preserved. In a mastaba south of the pyramid were buried Snefru's high priest Rahotep and his wife Norfred. They were represented by painted limestone statues. The Egyptians believed that such realistic sculpture would help a spirit to recognize a tomb as its home in the afterlife. Their features offer an exceptional look at how an ancient Egyptian would have appeared. Early explorers were so startled by the lifelike glass eyes of the statues that they dropped their tools and fled. These faces have been locked in a gaze toward the future for 3,000 years. Their solemn expressions have been thought to show their confidence in immortality because they were connected to the pharaoh. The woman Norfred is identified as a princess. In addition to the title of high priest, Rahotep's statue is inscribed, King's Son of his Body. This has led scholars to speculate that this figure may well depict the son of the pharaoh Snefru. Snefru himself was destined to be buried in his masterpiece, the Red Pyramid. Inside, a magnificent hallway passage opens to a burial chamber with ceilings that stretch 45 feet high and appear to be held in place by beams made of stone. Though long ago emptied by tomb robbers, the chamber would have held unimaginable riches and ultimately its royal occupant, the pharaoh's corpse. Here, the dead pharaoh was thought to gaze through the shaft to watch day turn into night. Sealed in a stone tomb, a body would quickly decompose from moisture. The ancient Egyptians realized they were actually destroying what they were hoping to protect, and so, upon Snefru's death, he would become something else. It was during the 4th dynasty in ancient Egypt that the pharaohs undertook the most ambitious building projects ever attempted before now. The first to build here was the pharaoh Khufu. He succeeded his father Snefru in the year 2551 BC. Snefru had built the bent and red pyramids at Dashur. Now, Khufu would build on his father's achievements, erecting the largest pyramid on the Giza Plateau.
Khufu, the builder of the Great Pyramid, inherited an already very stable, centralized, and powerful kingdom. And although we're very impressed by the Great Pyramid, it's important to remember that his father had already had 2 pyramids built, also massive monuments in stone, which, if you took them together, would easily outweigh the scale of the Great Pyramid. So we're very impressed by what Khufu achieved, but in many ways, he was just continuing a tradition that was already established before him.
Rising some 480 feet high, the Pyramid of Khufu is taller than the Statue of Liberty, St. Peter's Cathedral, or an Apollo spacecraft on its launching pad. In fact, it was the tallest structure on Earth until the Eiffel Tower was built in 1889. It was meant to be seen from everywhere.
The site that he chose was very important because it's on a rise. It's a plateau and it's on a rise. And so his monument could be seen throughout the whole northern part of the country. So wherever you were around the capital, you could see the monument that was being built.
The Great Pyramid is constructed of individual stones that weigh an average of 2.5 tons each. The immense structure contains more than 2,300,000 of these stones, all placed in such seemingly perfect order that it is almost impossible not to think that this was somehow the building project of gods. Inside, a chamber known as the Grand Gallery was built near the top. It is a red granite room, the final resting place for the pharaoh. At the far end of the chamber is the red granite sarcophagus of the pharaoh Khufu, for whom the Great Pyramid was built. The term sarcophagus comes to us from the Greek word sarx, which means flesh, and phagein, to eat. Combined together as sarcophagus, this gruesome word describes these ancient stone coffins as flesh-eating boxes. How the Egyptians quarried, shaped, and moved so much stone to the Giza Plateau has baffled scholars for centuries. They had no beasts of burden or wheels strong enough to carry the weight. By this achievement, his pyramid transformed Khufu into the very symbol of absolute rule, and the 5th century Greek historian Herodotus chronicled the pharaoh's extreme cruelty.
Khufu drove them into the extremity of misery. For first, he shut up all the temples to debar them from sacrificing in them. And thereafter, he ordered all Egyptians to work for himself. To some was assigned the dragging of great stones from the stone quarries in the Arabian mountains as far as the Nile. The people worked in gangs of 100,000 for each a period of 3 months. The pyramid itself took 20 years in the building. But to such a pitch of wickedness did Khufu come that when in need of money, he sent his own daughter to take her place in a brothel.
Modern-day scholars are skeptical that Khufu was truly an evil king.
The notion that Khufu was a harsh ruler seems to have originated in a text that dates to a much, much later period, in which he is seen as sort of a bored or even an indifferent ruler, not to say necessarily harsh. That idea was picked up by the later Greek historians, and we are told that he was truly a tyrant. But really, there is no contemporary evidence.
In fact, there is little written history at all describing the builder of the Great Pyramid, and aside from a granite head thought to depict him, only a tiny statuette of him carved in ivory has survived to the present. Outside his pyramid at Giza, a large burial field was recently excavated that suggests that the bodies buried here were the workers whose back-breaking labor built Khufu's Great Pyramid. Had the workers been slaves, Khufu would not have honored them with burial so close to himself. What is known is that not only had pyramid building practices evolved to a high standard here at the beginning of the 4th dynasty, the practice of embalming had grown into an arcane and mystical art that transformed a corpse into a mummy. Beginning about the time of Khufu's father, Snefru, mummification became essential in Egyptian religion for the dead pharaoh to complete a transformation from earthly ruler to heavenly king. They believed that by preserving the physical body intact, they could preserve the pharaoh's spirit forever. An elaborate ritual of embalming was designed to save the corpse from decomposition and restore its faculties so that it could live in a well-equipped tomb. The preservation of bodies through mummification allows us to gaze upon the faces of pharaohs and others whose bodies were preserved over 4,000 years ago. It also allows us to see firsthand just how mortal the god-kings really were. Through medical analysis, modern doctors know that the pharaohs suffered from gallstones, tuberculosis, polio, appendicitis, hernias, club feet, and cholera. Outside Khufu's pyramid were found these pits in which mysterious pieces of cedar wood native only to Lebanon were found. Archaeologists were able to remove and then reassemble all the fragments. The result was a 143-foot boat that could actually float upon water. The boat was probably provided by Khufu's successor in 2528 BC. This was his son, Djedefre. It was he who presided over his father's burial at Giza. His name, Djedefre, meant enduring like Re, a reference to their god of the sun. Djedefre's main significance was that he was the first pharaoh to adopt such a son name. The pharaoh Djedefre ruled only 10 years before he was succeeded by his brother Khafre in 2520 BC. Khafre, whose name meant appearing like Re, the sun god, immediately began construction of the second pyramid here on the Giza Plateau. This pyramid was for himself and built in the shadow of his father's Great Pyramid. The best evidence points to the fact that this work continued throughout his reign of 30 years.
During the reign of Khafre, the Egyptians certainly seem to have been very prosperous, as they were under his predecessors, although some people have suggested that the drain on the economy and the national population of building these great pyramids was so huge that impoverishment started to set in at about that time.
Indeed, there were signs that Khafre's rise to power marked a turning point for the Fourth Dynasty, a succession of kings that had begun nearly 600 years before. Still, Khafre built on, adding an elaborate mortuary temple complete with a magnificent, life-size statue of himself, protected by the hawk god Horus. But perhaps the foremost symbol of Khafre's reign towers on the eastern base of the Giza Plateau, in the shadow of his pyramid, the Great Sphinx. The Egyptians revered these mythical beasts as the guardians of sacred places. Khafre's workers shaped the stone here into a lion and gave it their king's face over 4,500 years ago. This is the oldest known royal portrait in such large scale. Its ears are more than 12 feet tall, and its eyes are 6 feet high. Its body measures 240 feet, more than 3/4 the length of a football field. Its head rises to 66 feet in height, the equivalent of a 6-story building. The name Sphinx, which means strangler, was given by the Greeks when they first encountered this fabulous stone creature.
The Sphinx itself may have been formed out of the bedrock that was left in that area when that was actually an area of quarrying. And some of the basic stones for the core of the pyramid probably came from that area.
In fact, scholars tell us that the Great Sphinx was probably carved out of the stone left over from the pyramid of Khafre, but its ultimate purpose remains unknown. Still crouching in front of his pyramid complex, alone in the silence of the desert, the stony stare of the Sphinx provides challenges but offers no clear answers. As if to yield a clue, its time-scarred, weather-beaten face looks out upon the plain and fronts the setting sun. History would one day reveal that the sun indeed was setting upon the dynasty of pharaohs that built the pyramids and Great Sphinx of Giza.